Have you ever tried to make emotional alt pop? Something like Sombr, Role Model, or even the Neighbourhood, and it just comes out sounding thin? The truth is, these records sound effortless, raw, intimate, like the whole thing was recorded in one take with a single guitar. But you sit down to make your own, and it goes one of two ways. It's either empty and lifeless, or you keep piling on layers until it's cluttered and muddy. What took me way too long to realize is that that sound is completely engineered. There's a huge amount going on in there, but it's built to sound like there isn't. I've spent years producing for major labels, and one idea changed everything for me. This style is about restraint. It's what you leave out that makes it work. So today I'm breaking down the 7 techniques behind this sound and how you can use them in your own productions. Let's dive in. Technique number 1, the hollow voicing. One of the biggest mistakes I see producers and artists make is this. They write a chord progression, cram every note they can into each chord, and build the whole song on top of that. And sometimes that works, but a lot of the time it leaves the melody with nowhere to go because the chords are already filling up the space. Here are the chords from Sombr's Back to Friends. Firstly, the way most people would play them. Every note packed into each chord on one guitar. It sounds full, but there's really nowhere for a vocal to sit. Now watch what happens when we do this instead. Keep the bass moving, but up top, just leave the 1st and 5th. In this case, we're in D flat major, so we're going to use D flat and A flat. So overall, you go from this to this. So try this on something you're working on. Keep your bass notes, drop the middle harmony, and just leave the 1st and 5th running throughout. Then if you want, float a 3rd over the top like they did here. So now the foundation's open and the vocal's free. But here's something that surprised me early on. Even with the chords sitting perfectly, the track can still feel small and a bit polite. And the fix is something I was asked about in a recent video, how to get those big, heavy guitars even if you don't play guitar at all. Technique number 2, the guitar wall. So much of this sound comes down to big, heavy guitars. But a lot of producers don't play guitar, don't have time to record it properly, or just don't have the gear. So how do you get that big, authentic guitar sound without ever picking up a guitar? Here's how I build these guitars completely in the box. Firstly, I start with a technique called split guitars. And you may have seen it in my indie pop video. On one side, we've got just the 1st and 5th, basically a power chord, so it takes the distortion really well. And on the other side, I put the 3rd on its own. And straight away you've got some width before you even touch the tone. But that's only half of it. I'm in Contact using the Sunburst library. I've simply got it set to the open melody setting, and you can really be so creative with the sound design here. So you've got all of these sound presets on the right. And to get that really natural feel, it's really important to tweak the internal settings. It's then more so about how you process them and how you place them in the context of your mix. So that's essentially the guitar sound here. Split guitars for the shape and width, and Native Instruments Sunburst, utilizing the pedals and internal settings. Live playing's always option 1 if you can. But if you can't, VSTs will get you shockingly close. And a quick one before we move on. If you're an artist or producer looking for a system for creating professional level tracks, and you want my direct help to make that happen, check out the video in the link below to learn more, and book in your free call on the same page. Back to the video. So now the guitars are doing the heavy lifting, but there's something that really caught me out early on. You can have the perfect guitar tone, and the track still feels flat in the gaps between the big moments. And it's usually not a mixing problem. It's that these records are packed with tiny details that the listener would never notice on purpose, but they definitely feel every one of them. Technique number 3, ear candy. Years ago, I was working on this track for EMI, part of Universal, and I had what I thought was the finished production good to go. But the A&R came back with a note I wasn't expecting. He said, in the second chorus, lift that bass synth up just a touch in volume, but only from the second chorus on, not the first. And all of a sudden, verse 2 going into that chorus had so much more weight. And that tiny difference, one small change that only happens later in the song, is what makes a track actually develop. You really want to create that point of difference for each section as the song goes on. And one of the best ways to do it is with ear candy. First up, in the second chorus of Back to Friends, there's a vocal cut that only lands there, and never in the first chorus. And that one small element makes that second chorus feel like it's lifted. And it's really how you stop your choruses from feeling copy and paste. And two key things that I did for the processing on this vocal that can really help it stand out. I've got some saturation really driving it. Here it is without. And then with. And I've really verbed it out just using Valhalla and pumping the mix to around 63%. And it's not the only moment doing that. Have a listen to verse 2 with just that one raked guitar strum. It's a single gesture, and suddenly the verse just has this attitude it didn't have a second ago. So instead of asking, what can I add to fill this out? Ask what's that one special moment that makes this section stick. A couple of other bits of ear candy that really help us jump from section to section. We've got the guitar feedback, and of course the reverse piano. So now the track's got some flavor, but here's where it gets clever. Because in verse 2, those same guitars almost stop being just guitars. And what they turn into instead is the thing that drives the whole section. Technique number 4, driving guitars. Here's how you make a section drive hard without touching the drums at all. You hand that job over to the guitars. In verse 2, I've got 2 guitar layers working together to push the whole thing forward. Part 1, the bass lock. The first layer follows the bass note for note, locking in the low end. Here's an example. On its own, it's just a little bit plain, but it's just reinforcing what the bass is doing. And it sets up the foundation for the layer that does the real work. Part 2, the chug layer. On top of that, we've got these chuggy, palm-muted guitars. And as you can see, I've got the sound preset set to crunch modern pop, and we're using the muted function so we can get that really cool palm muted sound. Together, those 2 layers give this driving, percussive feel. The guitars are basically carrying the groove now. And that's what gives verse 2 that momentum without leaning on the drums at all. And here's the thing, none of this comes down to having the most expensive setup. And sure, a good library helps, but the real difference is how you use what you've got. The voicings, the layering, the placement, that's the part most producers get stuck on. And it's exactly the kind of thing I work on one-to-one with producers I coach, getting their tracks finished to a standard they're genuinely proud to release. If you'd like that kind of help, there's a link below to book a free call. Now this next one sounds completely wrong on paper. It's one small move down in the low end that takes a track from basically rock to something far more emotional and expansive. And it's in the last place you'd think to look. Technique number 5, the piano bass. Here's what separates a bass from one that just sits there to one that really has impact. In the chorus, underneath the bass, there's a layered piano playing exactly the same notes. You barely hear it on its own, but it turns a flat, mechanical low end into something that feels warm and alive. For the piano itself, I'm using Source Lab, and I've chosen something with a little bit of that brightness, that synthetic power in the low end, and got something like this. And of course, when laying down piano bass notes, it's always a good idea to layer it with a higher octave. And this really fills it out. So in the chorus, doubling that with the bass and guitars is huge, but it gets even better. Then I've got the higher octave of that entire track sitting all the way to the right and tucked under the mix. And that's how you add real depth to a bass. Not by making it louder, but giving it dimension with elements underneath it. So the harmony, the guitars, the low end, all locked in. Now it comes down to the small details that separate a demo from a real record. And here's one on the record that, if done wrong, gives the whole thing away as a bedroom mix. Technique number 6, snare reverb. This is the difference between a snare that can really sound like a demo and one that sounds like a record. Many producers leave their snares totally dry. And this can occasionally work, but in many cases, it can lead to a mix that really lacks dimension and that professional sound. So we're going to add reverb to this snare, and the trick is to gate it. The gate gives it real, organic life and a sense of room, like it's actually sitting in a space. It's a small move, but a massive difference, and it's really the line between processed and produced. So now the track hits, it moves, it breathes, but there's still one thing missing. The thing that makes these records feel genuinely lush. And many producers think they need to be able to sing for this, but they don't. Technique number 7, hidden harmony. These records are full of lush, airy vocal layers holding everything together. Instead of recording these vocals in, I use Source Lab and the vocal pads inside it. So it might sound a bit odd in isolation, but simply that airy top end of the vocal can do so much to really fill out your instrumental section. Here's the chorus without and then with the choir pads. To fill it out even more, I added a pad, something transparent and airy that sits above the vocal and contrasts the top end. Here it is without and then with the pad. And in the bottom end, underneath what sounds like a real bass, I've got 2 respaces an octave apart for that mid-range and weight. Here's the bass without them. And there it is, really basic elements that can fill out the track and add that expansive quality. So from that hollow voicing to the hidden harmony, there are a bunch of things you can apply directly to your next alt pop track. But I'll be honest with you, none of this, the guitars, the layers, the bass, none of it matters if the arrangement underneath is weak. So if you want the sounds you just built to really hit, check out this video next.